Welcome, policymakers, honored guests. It is a pleasure to have you guys online with us and in person. Today we will be talking about employment and employment programs for people with disabilities. So this is my story as well as Karina's and thousands of other Floridians just like us with disabilities who struggle with the employment system and employment programs. So here we go. Imagine having your life's career path chosen for you by someone else. This is the norm for millions of adults with developmental disabilities every day. From their middle and high school days, they're often sent to classes and programs that automatically place them in two categories: food and filth. Examples being operating a teacher coffee cart, emptying recycling bins, cafeteria cleaning, and etc. Although good intentions come into play, sometimes good intentions can be hurtful and enable ableistic thinking amongst onlookers. People with developmental disabilities have untapped potential. Many are very tech savvy, and some make great customer service reps. Some can create the most beautiful artwork and pottery, while others are great at computer coding and can fix any IT issue thrown at them. Sadly, many programs only focus on the most basic of tasks and don't focus on the growth potential students and adults with disabilities face. For instance, myself, as a late diagnosed autistic who is also legally blind, have faced these struggles firsthand. I reached out to programs like vocational rehab for job coach services through discoverability. However, given the expertise, learning anything deep in technology was a no-go. Many of their clients often work in the food and janitorial industry. Despite the challenges I have faced, I'm able to hold down a full-time job with my current employer. However, I wish the assistants needed to grow with these programs were able to grow with me. Given the technical aspect of my position, these said programs meant to help me aren't able to, and at times I feel weak compared to my peers. Schools and government programs that offer job training tend to leave people with disabilities in the dark, typecasted into a small role that they may not want on the basis of their conditions alone. While these skills are beneficial for any student to learn, they shouldn't be the only skills they are left with. Job programs for people with disabilities should reflect on the skills that their clients possess and not what society's assumptions are for them. Programs need to be customizable for the individual's needs as well as the skills they possess. Currently, these programs aren't an easily accessible option in Florida, and they are few and far in between. As you will hear from my colleague Karina, we are just two examples of how these programs are flawed. Let's welcome Karina.
So, over my 7-year work history from 2014 to 2021, I held 7 permanent positions and 4 temps. I waited tables, I've done inventory and merchandising, I grew vegetables, I ran a cash register, etc., etc. I only kept one of those jobs longer than a year, and I kept most of them less than 6 months. My resume is filled with layoffs and terminations and temporary, temp positions that didn't last long enough to to go on a resume, and that's the average experience of a person trying to work, and as a neurodivergent person in the United States. Per the work culture I was raised around and my own ambitions, I always wanted to move up and get paid more and do work that I felt really mattered. But every time I was out of a job and was looking for another one, my well-meaning family and friends and their family and friends would always say something like, "Well, you should check out Publix. I heard they're really good for people with disabilities." And when I would try and say something like, "Well, I really want to do something that matters to me," they say something like, "Well, everyone's going to start somewhere," despite the fact that at that point I had already started somewhere several times. So I tried to get help. I enlisted the help of vocational rehab and ran into the same problem. So the couple, they did help me get work a couple of times, but those jobs didn't last any longer than the ones I got on my own, although one of them ended because of COVID, which is nobody's fault. And the fields that I was interested in either weren't hiring or they required things that I didn't have, like transportation, which is a different issue. And so, frustrated with the state of work and doing the same old thing, I decided that I wanted to try and work for myself in the arts. But despite what I've heard they're supposed to do, the VR in my area didn't know how or didn't want to help me accomplish that goal. When I told my counselor that I wanted to try and be self-employed, he was like, well, I'm just going to put you down for retail. Able-bodied and neurotypical people are allowed to have dreams and career goals. So how come we aren't? So to name a bad experience specifically, the last job I had was at Goodwill. I got it through my job coach at the CIL Jax, and it seemed like a good match because I'm really into thrifting. But this was still during the pandemic, and one of my roommates got COVID, and I never caught it myself, but per company policy, I had to take a COVID test to be able to continue to work. My manager took me into her office because she was supposed to have like a little hand test available, but it was missing a piece. So instead of driving the less than a mile to the closest CVS, she had me walk to the CVS, and I correctly assessed that was inappropriate, and I called my counselor, and she was like, yeah, that's inappropriate, I'll talk to her. In the meantime, I went and got the test and came back. She at least reimbursed me for the test. I took it, and then she called corporate, and corporate said you can't come back until you have a professional test. So I had to leave, and the only way for me to get a professional test was for me to go to a doctor or get a test from CVS or Walgreens. I didn't have any health insurance, so I had to go to CVS or Walgreens, and I didn't have a car, so I had to get a hold of someone to drive me through the drive-through because you couldn't just ride your bike up there. Which is, again, transportation is another issue. By the time I was able to get those test results, about a month had passed, and I sent them to her, and she told me they had taken me off the schedule. So I called my counselor, and the counselor said, the counselor told me that she had talked to my manager about sending me to walk to the store, and she said that I had the option of telling her no, which she didn't give me the option of telling her no. The option was walk to the store and buy this test or go home. And she told me that I should have asserted myself, which is something she was supposed to be helping me do. And then when she called to try and help me get my job back, Goodwill ignored her. And she told me that there was unprofessionalism on both sides. I never went back there. It's important to note that I don't think I handled that situation perfectly, but I don't think I shared unequal blame with someone who had significant power over me in an already stressful situation. In a world where so much of work culture is already unhealthy, difficult or stressful situations on the job are unavoidable, but disabled people seem to bear the brunt of these experiences, and I dare say we don't need the extra stress.
As you've just heard from my associates, some of the biggest challenges they face are finding employment that is comparable to that of a person without disabilities and the difficulty with transportation. According to estimates by Vocational Rehab and Medicaid, only 1.1% of working-age autistic adults who have the potential for employment are being supported adequately and are properly employed. This leaves an estimated 1.98 million autistic adults without needed support and subsequently without employment necessary to have a reasonable quality of life. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 13.4% of Florida's residents are disabled. That equates to approximately 2.6 million Floridians. If we look at this by numbers, by work category, we have 19.9% between the ages of 18 and 64 that are employed full-time, 18.6% part-time, and a large 61.6% that are unemployed. Despite a slow upward trend, progress is severely limited by factors readily within our control. We must take an active role in improving the employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities. Considering this, one step towards progress might be to increase the number of government internships, apprenticeships, mentoring, and workforce experiences for persons with disabilities. This would enable many more of these individuals to get valuable work experience, helping them to get that all-important first job or becoming employed or re-entering the workforce. Despite the ratification of Florida Statute 413.80 in 2019, the Employment First Act, and the establishment of over 11 agencies to assist employment of individuals with disabilities, it continues to be a challenge for these individuals to find employment. We are proposing that government entities be strongly encouraged and rewarded for allocating a portion of their revenues to fund employment opportunities specifically for individuals with disabilities. Currently, close to half of a city's revenue is obtained from various taxes, while the balance is obtained from permit fees, special assessment, intergovernmental revenues, charges for services, fines, forfeitures, miscellaneous revenues, and other sources which include federal grants. It should be noted that many people with disabilities have families that do contribute to these revenues. Some of these revenues are allocated to a general fund that is used to pay regular employee salaries and to fund new and vacant positions. It is reasonable to conceive that a new position and/or vacant position be reserved specifically for an individual with a disability. However, this is only one spoke on a wheel of change. What's next? We have the allocated position. How do we fill it? We start by creating an inclusive workplace which welcomes and supports people with all kinds of differences, and by training those conducting job interviews. A 2020 study that was performed on autistic job seekers found that autistic applicants were less likely to engage in impression management, which is the conscious or subconscious process in which someone will attempt to influence how people perceive them using strategies such as persuasion and self-promotion. This causes autistic applicants to obtain to be rated poorly in confidence, communication skills, and likability. Not only are the conversational contents of interviews more stressful for people on the autism spectrum, but the nonverbal aspects can put them to a disadvantage. 43% of hiring managers view things like poor body language, including a lack of eye contact, not smiling, or fidgeting, all things adults on the autism spectrum may present, as an instant deal breaker, according to a report from Career Insights. I speak from a place of experience. I've accompanied my older son with autism to job interviews. It was shocking to realize that many employers proudly stated, yes, we are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but only appear to honor this law for individuals with visible handicaps. During one interview, even with prior disclosure of my son's disabilities and requesting the reasonable accommodation to have interview questions simplified or repeated, one interviewer became visibly irritated having to honor these accommodations. When we educate employers, they become more likely to be able to fulfill the requirements of the law and simultaneously provide a more inclusive workplace. This means understanding people have different ways of processing information, interacting with others, and achieving goals. This difference in processing can translate into significant benefits for companies, as a 2018 study demonstrated. They found that companies that adopted best practices, hiring and supporting individuals with disabilities, outperformed their peers. On average, these companies achieve 28% higher revenue, double their net income, and 30% higher economic profit margins. It is self-evident that improving the practices towards employment of individuals with disabilities would benefit many different key stakeholders, members of the population, and the community as a whole. In conclusion, we are proposing the allocation of city-earned revenues to the employment of individuals with disabilities and concurrently training all employees on disability awareness and etiquette to help build knowledge and a culture of support. Thank you.